rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, August 5th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Dana Fisher, director of the Center for Environment, Community, and Equity, professor in the School of International Service at American University, author of Saving Ourselves from Climate Shocks to Climate Action. We will talk about that and what kind of help we can expect from a potential Harris presidency. Speaking of which, Kamala Harris secures enough delegate votes to be the official nominee. Voting ends today, but she's already crossed the threshold. Meanwhile, Harris to name a VP pick within the next 24 hours. His Democratic rivals meet with Harris in D.C. Trump quits the ABC debate in September, but says he would debate if it's on Fox News. New report, the DOJ investigation into a $10 million Egyptian payout to Trump was quashed by Bill Barr and never revived by Merrick Garland. Meanwhile, Trump's criminal January 6th case gets revived. Elon Musk's PAC is investigated in Michigan for misleading voters. Sort of like up. Jacob, what was that guy's name? Jacob Wall? Yeah. Maybe they could share a jail cell together. The Fifth Circuit, surprise, surprise, narrows the Voting Rights Act further. Neil Gorsuch warns, maybe threatens, against any attempt to impose judicial reforms. The UN report outlines torture, sexual violence, other human rights violations versus random Palestinians detained by Israel. Meanwhile, Israeli attack on a shelter in Gaza City kills at least 30. U.S. sending troops to the Middle East now as Israeli actions raise tensions for a possible war with Iran. Back home, the Secretary of Defense has decided to override the 9/11 plea deal because, justice in the American way. Right-wing fascists riot across the UK. Bangladesh PM resigns and flees the country, and the stock market crashed. Globally. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Emma Vigeland out today. She's out tomorrow, too, right? And then Wednesday?
3-day vacay.
3-day vacay. Maybe in the fun half, I'll talk about why I wasn't here on Friday. I went to a birthday party weekend down on the Cape. Saw some great music. It was awesome. But before we get there, we've got a lot of news to get to today, and soon we'll be talking to Dana Fisher about where we're at in terms of climate change, what we can, making an assessment of the Biden record and an assessment of what we're going to be doing going forward in the event that Kamala Harris, or for that matter, Donald Trump, become president. First, let's just go to this. I was out and about. I'm not a hugely social person. I don't know if that comes across to people. But there are occasions where I do go to social events. I'm not a total shut-in. I'm a lot of fun. I don't need to say that twice.
Protest too much.
Yeah. But when I go out to social events, people want to talk about politics, and they say, "I'm sorry, I really want to talk about this," and then I'm like, "Well, it's fine. It's really all I do anyways."
Yeah, say something to annoy me, then I'll want to talk to you about it too.
Yeah, exactly. Just say anything, and if I think even slightly wrong, we will engage for the next hour and a half. But the thing that I found, like, just from an excitement, and a lot of people are excited just because they're not depressed. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to.
It's different.
There was a lot of depression, but one of the things that's been incredibly unique, and I talked about this with Digby Friday, is we have had this primary for the vice presidency. We've never had anything like this before. People can position and this and that, and people run in the primary to become the vice president, but that involves them attacking other, fellow Democrats or fellow Republicans. There's never been a situation where everybody's just rolling out different ways in which to attack the Republican. And then we get this. And, I think it's very hard to predict what a vice president's going to turn out to be, particularly when one's been a governor. The governors have all different dynamics that go on in different states. It's a function of like, what kind of legislature do you have? What kind of, what kind of other challenges in the state you have? And that's going to change nationally. But it is quite clear, and there are some very good candidates. There's some that I don't like as much. There are some that I do. But it's quite clear that the first thing that you would want, it seems to me, if you're Kamala Harris, is to do no harm. No net negative. But of course, you have some needs too. But let's just look at the possible do harm. There's only one candidate who has, well, I guess Mark Kelly, you could argue as well. Unions have spoken about Mark Kelly, and he quickly changed his position to, I would support the PRO Act now. And as a, that I don't know if that sufficed for unions. I'd be a little bit nervous about where his heart is on this matter. But then there's Josh Shapiro. And here is, let's play this clip. This is number what, 5? 3. If you've got a vice presidential, not nominee, but potential pick, having to justify himself, it seems to me you've got your answer as to whether you want to pick this guy. Just because, why invite controversy? Go.
Support a two-state solution now. Can you kind of just talk about that evolution?
Something I wrote when I was 20? Is that what you're talking about? I was 20. Look, I have said for years, long before October 7th, that I favor a two-state solution. Israelis and Palestinians living peacefully side by side, being able to determine their own futures and their own destinies, being able to work as they want and worship as they want, and understand the power of living peacefully side by side and how that will lift up both parties in this, or both sides of this conversation. This is obviously a very challenging situation and has been for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It is my hope that we can see a day where peace will reign in the Middle East, where there will be a two-state solution, where all leaders involved in the conversations will respect the other side and show a willingness to make the hard choices to find peace. And I hope that the U.S. government will always be a partner in peace and trying to find a path forward in the Middle East.
Okay. I mean, look, I would take issue with a number of things there, and this is almost, but to be fair, just to the point I'm trying to make, it's not relevant. But again, I can't help myself. What's going on right now is not a conversation. You have a minimum of 40,000 Palestinians killed. I mean, this is a bare minimum. No reasonable, I mean, not even reasonable. I mean, I don't know anybody who's refuting that the minimum isn't 40,000. Then the question becomes like, are we really talking the actual number right now is 60,000? Is it 70,000? If you have faith in, the prestigious Lancet, they anticipate closer to 200,000 will be killed as a result of this. Regardless, it's not a conversation. It's not a conversation. You could read the papers today, and whether you think that the U.S. administration is sincere or not, they are saying they've been lied to by Bibi Netanyahu. In whether they're going to do anything about it is another question. So the symmetry involved here is, I think, a little problematic. The idea that this conflict has existed for thousands of years, that it's like a conflict on religious identity, as opposed to a conflict that involves colonialism and the ethnic cleansing, essentially, of what was Palestine or Palestinian Mandate, or whatever you want to call that area. The fact is, there were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people expelled from that area. And they're all Palestinians. This is not because of religious differences that have existed for thousands of years. I'm sorry, that's a fiction. That's honestly, it's junior high stuff. Maybe junior high, maybe elementary school. And that's only because of poor teaching of that. But my bigger point is, and frankly, this guy's younger than me, isn't he? He's 51. He's younger than me. I was 21. I was 20 at one point too. When I was 14, you could see there was a problem going on. So be that as it may, the point is, if you're picking a vice president, why pick someone who's going to drive this measure of controversy? I know what the argument is. Pennsylvania is an incredibly important state. We need to win Pennsylvania. Well, let's just look at the numbers here. He's popular in Pennsylvania, but not that popular. Here's Josh Shapiro's approval numbers. Remember, he ran against, what was it, Doug Mastriano, right? Who was a lunatic. A lunatic. He did good numbers against him, but it's not clear that anybody couldn't have done good numbers against him, particularly in 2022. But look at his polling numbers. 49% of Pennsylvanians surveyed approved of Shapiro, 31% disapproved. 46% of independents approved of Shapiro's performance. I mean, that's good, but it's not great. In April, 54% believed Shapiro had done good or excellent as governor. So his numbers have been dropping, completely divorced from whether he's going to be the Democratic nominee for vice president. I think if you're going to make the argument that we're going to take on this risk, we're going to alienate education activists who were the first people to come out about this. I mean, you can go back to when we were talking to Jennifer Berkshire about this. We were talking about Shapiro's, and that was on day 1 or 2 of the Harris potential candidacy. That was out there. And then this stuff about Gaza, and not just that, it was the way that he went after protesters about Gaza, comparing them to the KKK. And if I have one more Gentile in the media on Twitter, I don't know if your name is like Worthington or Scarborough. I don't want to be called an anti-Semite by these people. Because if my entire family finds out, they're going to be bummed out. Most of them, I think he would consider anti-Semitic as well, though, now that I think about it. But Shapiro's got problems. And then there's, these little tiny scandals that I think are, I don't know the details, frankly, but I do know how they're being reported. I do know that there's controversy around his office saying that someone who was stabbed 20 times committed suicide when he was AG. I know that there was controversy around his office when there was somebody who had been sexually harassing somebody in the office, and supposedly they didn't make it public or whatnot. Not that he had that, but people working for him. Valid or not valid, give me the equivalent with Tim Walz. Give me the equivalent with Bashir. They're going to dig up stuff on all these people, but it doesn't look like they're going to even have to do much effort.
Yeah, make them dig.
With Shapiro to undercut Democratic enthusiasm right now for Harris. And the biggest jumps in enthusiasm have been people of color, with black people, with young people. And it also just so happens that those three cohorts are most engaged in this issue about Gaza. And frankly, in protest. And so it just seems like a mistake. Meanwhile, Andy Bashir, people don't seem to know this, put up this guy, he is the second most popular governor in the United States. He is the most popular Democrat, I think, in the country. Governor.
96th percentile, if I'm doing the math right.
67% approval rating. Now, to be fair, he's got a red Senate and a red House, and he's not been in a position where he has to do things that would piss off the Democrats. But my point is, I don't know how any of these people are going to be when they're in office. I mean, Walz has done some very good things in Minnesota with a very slight margin. And if it was up to me, I would put him in. It seems like a no-brainer to me. But if you're really concerned, like we need someone to go into, Pennsylvania or particularly Pennsylvania, the guy from Kentucky seems like a pretty good choice. If you really want to send somebody to Forsyth County, Andy Bashir sounds like the guy. If you want somebody to go around with Harris, both literally and figuratively, and speak to, the white working class, someone like Bashir, someone like Walz, frankly. I mean, picture Shapiro in your mind. He's dressed like he's, it's not even Friday casual. He dresses like an internet guy. I'm just saying, this is a very superficial analysis, but what are the other things that you need from a VP? You got two governors who have actually been in office twice as long minimum as Shapiro with executive abilities. You got Walz, who's been in both a congressman and a governor. So if you're looking for depth of ability, there's no question who the person you go with is. Now there's reports that Pelosi is supporting Walz and Sanders is supporting Walz. That seems like a slam dunk. But here's the thing. If this was the Obama candidacy, you can't do apples to apples, but Rahm Emanuel would say, F the left. We're going to get a sense, not as to whether the left is going to be in opposition to Kamala Harris if she wins. because yes, of course they will. There's going to be a ton of stuff that she does that we're not going to like. And that people, even maybe to the right of me within that spectrum and to the left of me, are not going to like. But this is going to give an indication of just like how much they think they can fight against, let's say, progressives. And if they decide not to engage in that fight, and to avoid that fight, that's a good sign that she's the kind of opponent you want. One that you can beat in certain instances, or at least influence in certain instances.
If we shame Kelly to take a pro-act thing, get all this with Shapiro, and then they end up picking Walls in the end of it, I think it'd be a productive little Veep stakes.
Yeah. Political Pirate says, my thinking has evolved on Shapiro. I think he might be the best person to stand up to Netanyahu. First off, what makes you think he has interest in standing up to Netanyahu? Second off, there is no having to stand up to Netanyahu. There is no having to stand up to Netanyahu. Look, people like me are being called an anti-Semite. They'll call Josh Shapiro an anti-Semite if they need be. We don't need to stand up to Netanyahu. We just simply say, we're not going to do what we keep doing for you. And good luck. The idea that somebody needs to stand up to Netanyahu, no one is having problems standing up. There's no desire to. So picking a guy who does not see something fundamentally wrong in this dynamic is not the way that's going to happen. That's just...
Did you see Grimm's thread on that? Grimm had a theory that Shapiro would be able to like go to China like Nixon did and be like, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to change our relationship with Israel, and that would be nice. I don't see that actually happening.
No, I don't think that's happening. I mean, I'm sorry. That is wish casting beyond belief. And again, like, look, I could also make the argument, well, Walls will be the one who gets us, Medicare for all. That's not going to happen either.
Yeah.
This is fantasy talk. I'm talking the election. Yeah. Who's going to win the election? And if you're making that calculus, it seems absurd. The only reason why you pick Shapiro at this point is if you think I'm willing to risk a significant portion, significant in the context of how close this election is going to be, portion of my base. That's it. You'll alienate no one with Bashir. You'll alienate no one with Walls. And there's been no established argument outside of the fact that Shapiro has 49% approval rating less with independents in Pennsylvania, and it's on the down trajectory. That's it. Folks, it's summertime. It has been blistering hot all summer in New York. I got a patch in my apartment that feels like I'm walking through a sauna. I cannot get any airflow there. It's crazy. My AC was broken for half the summer. There's one way that I keep hydrated. It's right here in this bottle. Every day, Liquid IV. And now they have some pretty refreshing summer flavors like popsicle firecracker and rainbow sherbet. Totally hit the spot when you need transformative hydrating relief all summer long. Indulge in hydration with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powered hydration brand in America, Liquid IV. I don't know what else to say. Every day, 1 to 2 bottles of this. It is always here every day in my show. Sometimes, I'll be going get me, because I forgot to take it out of the fridge. And I'm asking, that's it. It comes in little packets. If you're traveling, you can take it with you easily. Put it in your suitcase. You put a week's worth, and it's like this much. Super easy. It tastes great. You can make your own Liquid IV popsicles. I like to do that with the pina colada. And they got all your favorite flavors on their website. Acai berry, I never know how to say that. Lemon lime, like I say, pina colada. But they also now have my fave, sugar-free. Raspberry melon, white peach, and right here is green grape. Tear, pour, live more. 1 stick plus 16 ounce of water hydrates better than water alone. Liquid IV is powered by LIV Hydroscience. It's an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. It has 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, 8 essential vitamins and nutrients. It's always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. Indulge in hydration this summer with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com. Use the code MajorityRep. The code is MajorityRep, not Majority Report. MajorityRep at checkout. It's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MajorityRep at liquidiv.com. Quick break. Be right back with Dana Fisher, Director of the Center for Environment, Community, and Equity, Professor in the School of International Service at American University, author of Saving Ourselves from Climate Shocks to Climate Action. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigland out today. Joining me now, Dana Fisher, Director of the Center for Environment, Community, and Equity, Professor at the School of International Service at American University, author of Saving Ourselves from Climate Shocks to Climate Action. Dana, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me, Sam.
Let's start with, I guess, just the broad strokes here. Sorry, I just lost my notes. You say that we need something called an anthro shift. Before we get to that, like, where are we in terms of assessing how well the fighting climate change movement has been up to this point?
Well, I mean, let's start first with just thinking about how our society is handling the threat of the climate crisis. And so far, we're doing a pretty terrible job. We are nowhere near where we need to be in terms of reducing contributions to, anthropomorphic global change in terms of thinking about emissions of greenhouse gases. I mean, greenhouse gases continue to go up at, with a slope that's very similar. You can kind of see it here. The slope continues at the same rate, even though places like the United States are using more and more clean energy. We're continuing to consume more. So we're continuing to emit as much, if not, the same rate of greenhouse gases as before. And that is the problem, because as long as those concentrations continue to go up, the world is going to continue to warm. And we are right now facing multiple risks simultaneously, right? We've got the Park Fire here in the United States. Out west, we've got, I believe, a hurricane just made landfall over in Florida, just like an hour ago or something. So that's the second hurricane to hit the United States so far this year, and it is August 5th. And we're sitting in a heat dome. So here in Washington, D.C., it's going to be just about 100 degrees for I don't know how many days we've had so far. So we're experiencing lots of the effects of the climate crisis, and we're just not doing what we need to do.
When we say we, or when you say we, are we talking about we as in the United States, or are we talking we as a species? Is there a differential there? Does one follow the other? What's the relationship between those things?
Well, so when I say we, I mean we as society broadly defined. However, the climate crisis is caused by those who burn fossil fuels, and those who have higher emissions tend to be those that are wealthier, right? So it is the advanced industrialized nations that have contributed the most to the climate crisis. In fact, we, the United States, has contributed the most absolutely to overall historical emissions. So when I say we, the whole world needs to deal with this, not just individuals. And when I say we, I certainly do not mean individuals, although a lot of fossil fuel companies have tried to redirect attention away from we as the general society to we as in you and me, and we need to change our power and change our eating and change our driving. It's actually a systemic issue, and the only way to address it is systemically. While that's happening, and it's happening too slowly, what we're seeing is developing countries that are small island nations, are suffering much more of the risk and much more of the effect of the climate crisis. I mean, some countries are actually literally going underwater right now. People are having to evacuate, and they're experiencing the worst of the climate crisis so far. So I do mean we broadly, not just we as a country, but at the same time, some are contributing more than others. And we need to recognize that this is not an equal crisis.
Was there, and I want to get to more towards the solutions, but just, did the movement to fight climate change start on the wrong foot? I mean, because when you say we as individuals can't do this by, we need a policy response. I remember 20 some odd years ago seeing a movie called The Real Inconvenient Truth and I think he was a Green candidate or had been involved in New York Green, which was a response to Al Gore's movie, which is credited, I think, with widely making people aware of climate change, that Gore was talking about, turn off your light bulbs or whatever it was in terms of a reaction, like what we can do as individuals. And that the real inconvenient truth was that we need a more systemic approach. But by that point, I think that movie came out 4 or 5 years later. What's your sense of that?
Well, let me just say, so I was involved in doing research on climate change way back then in ancient history, right? So Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth was actually building off of the work that he did, which was extremely foundational in terms of getting the world to agree to the Kyoto Protocol, which was a legally binding treaty that was written in Kyoto, was finalized in Kyoto in 1997, that if implemented, and the world had followed through on that, and that's mostly developing countries, developed countries, including the United States and Canada and Russia, et cetera, had followed through on their commitments, we would be in a completely different world. So the inconvenient truth was it wasn't just about putting on sweaters and turning down the thermostat. It was actually about the inconvenient truth of all the things that had to change in our world. And so while Gore did not really shine a light on the systemic changes that were needed, I don't think it's fair to say that he wasn't recognizing the way that this was a political issue, because I think that he probably did the most to try to do something about the issue, but it just didn't work out the way he planned. as we remember,
and then,
2000 election.
And then
very
George
well.
Bush, yes, and then George Bush came in and basically killed the Kyoto protocols for all intents and purposes, I guess. And so
The Senate helped too. I would just say the Senate
yes.
helped.
Well, I mean, that was in the air, as it were. I just remember what was her name? Whitman, Christy Todd Whitman, telling me it's somewhere around 2010 that if liberals hadn't been so aggressive about climate change, maybe conservatives wouldn't deny that it was a problem.
That's a weird statement, I would say, because anybody who's paid anybody who's paid any attention recognizes that conservatives who are, tend to be sympathetic to fossil fuel interests, or even in the pockets of fossil fuel interests, are going to always support fossil fuel interests. And the inconvenient truth, here it is actually that as long as we want to support fossil fuel expansion, we can never address the climate crisis adequately unless the silver bullet emerges that doesn't exist today that makes it possible to burn fossil fuels while not contributing to the climate crisis. So carbon capture and storage and something like that. If that ever were scalable, which it's not, perhaps we could continue the way we are now. But otherwise, we need systemic changes.
With all that said about what Gore was able to do, and we can go over what the Biden administration, their report card essentially. At the end of the day, you write that we can't rely on, Kamala Harris is not going to necessarily save us.
Kamala Harris had a chance. I mean, she could have saved us. I mean, she has a history of running. When she ran in 2019, right? She actually said she was going to stop fracking in the United States. If she stopped fracking in the United States, that would be huge because it would basically stop the natural gas boom that's happening in our country. It would substantially reduce our carbon footprint as a country, and it would put us on a completely different path. It would also infuriate a bunch of swing states and a bunch of red states. And she has said, I believe on the 28th of July, she said that she has stepped back from that position. So there are things that somebody in political power can do. It's just that it's about systemic change that's going to mean that political interests and capital interests, that is fossil fuel interests, which have privileged access to both natural resources but also political power in our country at this point, are going to be very unhappy with it. And nobody wants to, poke the bear if it were. But the problem is, if you're not going to poke the bear, lots of polar bears are going to drown, and a lot of people who live on the coast are also going to experience the climate crisis. And we're going to see it, these climate shocks that we're experiencing now are the least that we're going to ever experience in the rest of our lifetime, right? Because they're just going to get worse and worse and come more frequently, because that's the effect of, concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
So in terms of moving forward, though, the fundamental thing that people have to understand is that the systemic problem we have, it's almost on twofold. We have a systemic political problem, and we have a systemic sort of like economic problem, both of which contribute to our inability, or both of which contribute to climate change, I guess, and to global warming. And we can't get to the second one unless we address the systemic political problem, the first one. So what's the best way to do that at this juncture too? I mean, they've had quite a run up in terms of like being able to figure this out. And we should say also, just in the context of the fracking, we are now the world's greatest producer of fossil fuel, I guess. Broadly speaking,
we export more natural gas and more oil now than any other country in the world.
Has ever?
Yeah.
Has
ever? I don't know if it's as ever, but at the moment we are number one in the world in terms of exporting fossil fuels, which is coming under the most climate aggressive president we've ever had, right?
All right. Well, let's talk. I mean, just let's do that just so that we can get that, on the table as well. Biden's record. There are some things that he's done that have been really good, some things not so great. Give us the sort of the top of the good and the bad.
Well, the top of the good is that, I've for over 25 years, I've been studying climate policy making in the United States. I've written a ton of papers about failed climate efforts, failed climate legislation. And this is the first time I ever got to publish one that was a success through the Inflation Reduction Act, which was not what Biden had wanted. Biden came in with the more aggressive Build Back Better Act. He couldn't get it through the Congress. So we have the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the most aggressive piece of climate legislation that's ever been passed. And it was thanks to President Biden. And President Biden, beyond that, has invested widely in a clean energy transition. If we were not sitting, looking over the precipice of the climate crisis, this kind of incremental policymaking, if it had happened in 2000, we'd be golden, right? It's just we don't have time for it at this point. So I would just say that, Biden's done a lot, but it's just not enough given where we are. And the things that have gone poorly is that the Biden administration has continued to approve and expand fossil fuel consumption of fossil fuel infrastructure building, right? They approved the Willow Project. They allowed the deal, which granted the Inflation Reduction Act probably wouldn't have been passed if there hadn't been a deal with Senator Manchin, right, which basically tied clean energy expansion to fossil fuel expansion, right? So they go hand in hand. All of that, though, means that we have companies in the United States that are continuing to build out more infrastructure to extract more fossil fuels. And all of the science says that we need to have basically, flattened out our expansion or our consumption, and then we need to start going down on our consumption by 2030. And we're not, we're going up. We continue to go up, and we're sending it elsewhere. So even though in the United States we have more clean energy, we're continuing to extract more and send it all over the world to anybody who will buy it.
First off, let me note that the idea that if something had been done 24 or 23 years earlier would have made such a dramatic difference really points out the rate in which we are sort of like the amount of time, how quickly we're running out of time.
We are definitely running out of time. I mean, there's so many indications of that, and yet people aren't paying attention.
Just put in context the pause on the liquid natural gas export facility. I spoke to Bill McKibben in February. I think it was just literally weeks before he was planning to go down and get arrested in protest of that facility, and we got the permitting pause. How important is it, and how durable is that pause?
Well, I mean, first of all, the Secretary of Energy said very, very explicitly in her speeches that it was a temporary pause. So everybody who, screamed from the rooftops that the climate movement won, I think they're fooling themselves. It was a pause. It was a political maneuver. Unfortunately, it's pausing building out additional fossil fuel infrastructure, but there's already infrastructure in place that is being built and expanding our capacity now. So, as we're number one in terms of fossil fuel exporting in the world, we're the number one in natural gas, extraction. Do we really need to be more? I mean, that's an interesting question that I think it's worth asking. And certainly if you want to say that we want to celebrate a pause, it's just hard to celebrate that while we continue to extract so substantially. And
does it
export it all over.
I mean, my understanding of the positive of it is that it inhibits investment. It makes the investment in this technology, if you will, more risky. And that on some level, the idea, I mean, even like I think it was Andreas Malm we had on a couple of years ago, was like, you blow up a pipeline and eventually investors start going like, this may not be the best place for me to invest my money. And other investments begin to sort of be able to compete with that.
Sure, if the pause lasts long enough. But remember, this is a pause. We're not talking about stopping, not canceling a project.
Right.
Nothing was canceled. In fact, I think that on Biden's watch, more public lands have opened up to fossil fuel extraction than during the Trump administration, which is, I think, a notable thing. And that would go in the negative, category in terms of, climate losses, which is why basically in the end, and this goes back to the question you asked me originally, I say that because of where we are politically, where we are economically, the only way that we can realistically imagine that we can save ourselves is through civil society and through a climate movement that, pushes against power in a way that we haven't seen before.
Okay, so walk us through what that looks like, and then you also talk about both. Like, there's got to be an insider and outsider game.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about the outsider game, then we'll talk about the insider game.
Sure. I mean, well, I think that in some ways it's impossible to imagine the role that a movement can play if it doesn't involve insiders and outsiders, because a movement plays off of itself, right? It is a broad movement. So in terms of the climate movement, you have both activists who are going to work inside and lobby and work hard to put pressure from the inside on policymakers through the political system. And that is, as lobbyists, as folks who are, constituents, but then they also put pressure on the outside. And so in the book, what I talk about is what we call, the radical flank. And I'm using my air quotes here because this radical flank that we're seeing in the climate movement, as much as people are getting upset about, degradable paint being poured on Stonehenge or soup being thrown on a covering of it, a famous work of art, this is not particularly radical in comparison to previous social movements where their buildings were blown up and facilities.
People forget, like in the 80s, there was something like, 55 bombings over the course of that decade, maybe more.
Yeah. I mean, and if we think back even during the period, the height of the women's, struggle for women's suffrage, a building was blown up a month. I mean, and people died, right? And now we're talking about throwing a little tomato soup. I mean, and it's not that I'm saying you should destroy art. No artwork has been destroyed thus far.
Right.
So, so there's that. So anyway, I talk about the radical flank, which is the component of the climate movement that is expanding to try to draw more attention to the issue. And that is a very common progression in a social movement when a social movement hasn't achieved its goals. I mean, either a movement dies out because people just give up and they go back to doing something else, or, and in this case, the world is warming and we're personally experiencing more and more climate, shocks every day. So that's not going to happen. Instead, we see more and more people getting fed up with going through this insider type of activism and taking to the streets and engaging in nonviolent civil disobedience. And in it, as I talk about in the book, we see right now groups that are using performative protest. That's the soup throwers, the paint throwers, the crazy gluers, the people who do the slow walking. We're seeing a lot of it around Citibank right now in New York City, with people blocking Citibank's entrance and other banks that are investing in fossil fuel extraction. These are very performative acts of nonviolent civil disobedience to draw attention to the climate crisis. We also see groups that are what I call disruptors in the book, and those are groups that are engaging in broader campaigns where they're working as insiders, they're working to get banks to move money, they're working as personal investors, but then they do these moments of nonviolent civil disobedience so they can draw attention to this broader campaign. And both of those are necessary components of the climate movement right now. And as I talk about in the book, that will continue to expand as more and more people feel the effects of the climate crisis. When they feel it firsthand, people are going to put pressure on, powers that be, both at the local level, at the national level, theoretically at the international level, although that's a lot harder to imagine how that will work. And that's all going to be needed for the kinds of systemic changes to happen that are needed.
What has to be done in terms of contextualizing that experience so that people know that they're experiencing what they're experiencing is a function of climate change, right? I mean, this is a problem, analogous to tell the government to get their hands off my Medicare. Like there's not necessarily a one-to-one understanding, because it's, it increases the severity of storms. It increases the likelihood of storms. It's a little bit more abstract than, say, a street corner where 10 people have been hit by a car. We need to change the traffic pattern there.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. So the climate crisis basically is exacerbating normal weather patterns, right? So we see more drought, more floods, more tornadoes, more severe everything, right? We're seeing more severe hurricanes, and we're seeing them more severe in terms not of the wind, which is how hurricanes are measured, but rather in terms of the amount of water that falls, because hurricanes are going over climate change exacerbated heated waters, right? In terms of the sea surface temperature. And that means that the hurricanes suck up more warm water and they have more water to rain down on. So we're seeing that too. So it makes it harder to understand it. And there's also been a misinformation campaign that's been leveraged by companies that are associated with fossil fuel interests to try to make it a little harder to understand that. I mean, it's pretty easy to say this hurricane is so much worse because the water in the Gulf is so much warmer than it's supposed to be. And that means that X amount of water is falling more than we would normally expect. I mean, it's still somewhat abstract, but I don't think it's that hard to understand. I mean, everybody's experiencing how much warmer it is. Just look at the map today. I mean, I just was looking at the New York Times this morning, and you can just see the whole map, and just everything's red.
No,
that's not really normal.
This summer it has not relented in New York. Usually what you get for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe, or 2 weeks or a week, has been, I think we're on like week 8 now.
Yeah, and it's why they're calling it the summer of heat, right? And we're just in the beginning of August, so it's just going to continue. And the hurricanes, we're about to hit where hurricanes really start to get us.
Is there a cohort that needs to be activated? Is there a specific cohort? Because I mean, we could say, okay, it's not hard to understand that warmer waters create warmer storms. I would argue that, like, for a lot of people, it is harder to understand than it might be for, the people listening to our conversation and us. People don't know, there's a lot of things that people don't know. Also, there's not just, to beat my analogy up a little bit, it's not just a question of like the car hitting people. Maybe people can understand that dynamic, but they don't necessarily understand like the relationship, what's going on building the car. Like, where did the car come from? Like the man-made portion, right? Because we've seen the right, at least in this country, go from there is no climate change to, well, there's climate change, but that's God. And God does it, and God will, will step in and it'll change. Like, it's not man-made, that type of thing. And then if there is, well, maybe it was man-made, but man can't do anything about it. Like, is there a cohort out there? Like, how much of the society do we need to change the dynamic so that Kamala Harris can say, I'm going to stick with that fracking ban?
Well, so that's a great question. So I would just say that what we really need is there to be this critical mass that's putting pressure on politicians in power or politicians running for office that empowers them to step up to fossil fuel interests and give them the capacity to believe that they're not going to lose power if they make these decisions. I mean, one of the biggest challenges here is the timeline of addressing climate change is not the same. It's not 4 years, right? It's not the period of time that somebody is in the presidency. It's not 2 years, the amount of time somebody is in a congressional office. However, starting to build a fossil fuel, infrastructure like the Willow Project or something, you can actually put money into that, and your constituents will see that today. Whereas if Kamala Harris decides to do a fracking ban, there is going to be a period of time where people are going to lose jobs, lose money, worry that they're not going to have enough natural resources to run, the air conditioning or the heat, depending on where you live. Although more and more the air conditioning over the heat, of course, right? And so given that, there needs to be enough people to push back against that. And one of the things I would just say that I think is really interesting is that young people across the board are concerned about the climate crisis. In fact, there are a bunch of groups that, a handful of groups of young conservatives who are concerned about the climate crisis, who spent most of the Republican National Convention walking around trying to find somebody to talk to about climate change, because all of the people who are running the party over there are like, climate change isn't happening, et cetera, like you were talking about. But young people care about this. And one of the things that we know is that they feel very anxious about the climate crisis and worried for their future. And we saw that during 2019, 2020, until the pandemic stopped us. We saw that it really was pushing lots of young people to get politically active. What we really need is for those young people not to feel anxious. I mean, and anxiety is a natural component of the climate crisis for sure, and a natural emotion for people to feel. We need them to feel angry. When people feel angry, they have this sense of efficacy and they feel like they can do something about it. And the more people feel angry about this issue and are willing to vote on it, not say they're not going to vote, because not voting basically takes you out of the entire process, right? So you don't get a say. But if you say you're going to vote against somebody if they're not going to ban fracking, that actually could matter. And that's the kind of political power that's needed and the pressure that's needed from the citizenry, from civil society. I don't know that that will happen, though, until we experience many more climate shocks where many more people become unhoused and, really feel the effects of the climate crisis firsthand.
But is an electoral strategy like that, A, effective, and B, well, I think you would argue it's probably insufficient, but is it effective? Because we can say we're not going to vote for Kamala Harris because she's walked back on the fracking ban. But the reality is, in this instance, RFK sadly is also has said that climate change is just really, he's a conservationist of sorts, but his climate change for him apparently is just a mechanism for authoritarian control. And Donald Trump has basically said, the EPA is going to be outlawed from using the words. So I'm not clear where the electoral strategy, the electoral leverage is there, A. But B, if 18 to 34-year-olds are already there, maybe their attitude towards this, they feel disempowered, so they don't have the proper sort of perspective. They need to be angry instead of like the anxiety that comes with a certain amount of fatalism. What's the cohort that either A, feels empowered or is empowered? Because if I had a choice between I want to mobilize 500,000 18 to 34-year-olds, let's say, versus I've got every one of the board of directors of ExxonMobil who are going to do what I say, I would take the latter in that instance because they control the levers in a way that, but I imagine the answer has got to be somewhere in between those.
It absolutely is. Well, I was just saying, so here's it. First and foremost, the board of directors of ExxonMobil are never, ever going to agree to phase out.
No, I know
okay,
that.
So
I was a complete hypothetical.
It's really important to say it. So we cannot have faith in these fossil fuel interests, even if they say they're going to do stuff, because so many of them have backtracked on their commitments in the past.
Of course.
Year or two. Okay. And what I would just also say that my example around young people and supporting electoral politics is actually to point out. So young people don't tend to vote, and young people need to vote. And I am absolutely not saying that they should not support Kamala Harris. I'm saying they should support Kamala Harris, but they should also be pushing her to be as aggressive as she can be to address these issues, right? So she historically has supported a Green New Deal. She, historically supported a fracking ban. Will they be able to get that by asking her to do it during the 2024 election? Absolutely not. But I think constituents who vote, who say that, is part of the solution. The other part of the solution, as I talk about in the book, is that what we're going to have to see is many more people, and that's working as insiders, right? To go back to what we were saying before. But we also need people working as outsiders and playing a role in putting pressure on these power brokers and people in power to recognize that they are going to lose legitimacy if they don't take a stand and push for systemic change. And that's something that I think, and as I talk about in the book, is going to only come with more pain and suffering, because otherwise business as usual always wins, and we're going to see it continue to win. And we're going to see it push on progressive candidates to become more mainstream, because we see the deck is stacked against the general public and against addressing the climate crisis because of so many resources in the pockets and in the hands of fossil fuel interests.
Are there interests that we take for granted, and I think it's a safe assumption, that ExxonMobil and entities like that, they're always going to be on the wrong side of this? They're impossible. It's impossible for them to do anything otherwise. Is there a cohort of industry or individuals or populations that are sort of 50-50? Make a little bit of money from fossil fuel, but we could make more from this other thing. And maybe if fossil fuel becomes that much more problematic, not in terms of like what the studies say, but rather in terms of our bottom line, whatever that bottom line is, politically, economically, or financially, just socially. Where's that cohort?
Well, I would just say that, so what we see right now is that there are numerous clean energy companies, right? Companies that are making a profit off of battery storage, expansion of clean energy, wind energy, that do have capacity like you're talking about. But in a lot of places, those companies are actually fossil fuel companies, or components of fossil fuel companies, right? That are expanding out wind energy in Ohio, wind energy in Texas. And when they're embedded in part of this broader kind of fossil fuel mix, it's very hard to take a stand one against the other. I can imagine a world in which, for example, if fossil fuel subsidies no longer existed in this country, a lot of folks on boards of directors for energy companies broadly might say, hey, it's actually a lot more profitable for us to be investing in clean energy versus the dirty energy. But right now, with subsidies being what they are, it doesn't really work out that way. But that could change. And that could be something that a president could do.
So it seems like the idea is that in addition to people having a greater awareness and attempting to exert political pressure within the inside game, the outside game has to increase, while simultaneously, essentially, it's almost like an accelerationist argument on some level. Things have just got to be worse, but those who are advocating for this systemic change need to be in the game. So when those things happen, they are both interpreted and acted upon in a way that is much quicker than would otherwise be.
I think that's true. I mean, actually, a number of climate groups and different social movement organizations that work around climate change are starting to set up, like, basically programs where they're having people sign up for doing, being available when disaster hits in your community to start to shine a light on the way that both we need to build back in a more resilient way that is aware of the kind of, crisis that we're in and the types of shocks that we're probably going to experience, but also take those moments to shine a light on the way that the climate crisis and fossil fuel extraction, fossil fuel consumption is leading to the problem. And I think that that's absolutely necessary. I mean, we know that we are all going to be hit with a lot more climate shocks before we address the problem sufficiently. That's unfortunate, but that is just the truth. So it's really about preparing to change the narrative, because right now the narrative really doesn't go there. It's very hard to get a lot of meteorologists to talk about the way that climate change is playing a role in these problems, in these events, right?
Are there organizations that you think are doing this better than others? I mean, for the sake of people listening, if they wanted to get involved in these organizations, from ones that have the more radical tactics, because I don't think the ideas are necessarily radical as much as within the context of our society, the tactics in certain instances, like the ideas associated with putting paint on a statue, or tomato soup on a statue is, I guess, outside the norm of polite conversation. But I get,
as my research shows, nobody is talking about blowing up pipelines right now. Nobody. So this is not about radical violent tactics. This is maybe radical, radical in terms of performative radical tactics to get attention, right? And the whole idea is for it to help to increase what we call salience, right? Climate salience in the media. So we talk about it more. So more people think about it and draw the lines between the crazy heat wave we're experiencing, or the drought we're experiencing, or the way that the hurricane is going to devastate Savannah, Georgia. All of those things, and connect the dots, right? That's the reason they're doing it. With regard to groups that are doing a really good job, I would just say that I think that there's some interesting organizing taking place by Sunrise, the Sunrise movement, which has these really, really impressive locally embedded hubs that take place, that exist all over the country and a lot of campuses. On my campus, on American University's campus, we have a wonderful hub. I think they're doing a really interesting job. The Green New Deal Network has done some really interesting work, and they do work where they both work as outsiders, but they also are connected with elected officials and working there to think about how to capitalize on shocks when shocks happen and basically the idea that, we know that windows of opportunity open after disaster. And the idea is, how do you take advantage of that to transition us to a cleaner, better future? So I think those are two groups that are working like as outsiders, but, very much in an embedded way in communities.
And groups like Extinction Rebellion, who are doing more, it seems to me like a lot of that performative, so-called performative protests.
Well, Extinction Rebellion in New York City has been doing a lot of that. We're going to see, there's going to be a cello concert in front of Citibank on Thursday, which is brought to you by a coalition of groups, including Extinction Rebellion. I mean, also Climate Defiance, which has gotten attention for bird dogging elected officials and, leaders of different banks and fossil fuel companies. They're doing some really interesting work as well. So those are all these outsiders that are getting a lot of attention. I also think we need to talk about Third Act in there. They're the Rocking Chair Rebellion. That's Bill McKibben's group. And they are doing some really interesting work that's both insider and outsider. They're working on drawing attention to the way that banks are investing in fossil fuel expansion while also using nonviolent civil disobedience in a really performative way. They have these beautiful, hand-painted rocking chairs that they sit in and rock in front of the entrance to a bank, so you can't really get inside. So, I mean, there are so many of them. And one of the things that my research has documented is how there is this, many flowers bloom kind of approach where all these different groups are springing up. And we're going to see so many more, because as disaster hits, people start to form associations and start to think together and build these collectives to address the problem. And they do it at the local level, which is exactly where the problems are happening and where we need to start. But it obviously has to scale up to have the effects that are needed.
All right, we're going to put links to all of those groups in our website. And just lastly, you write about these actions are sometimes unpopular on their face, but do we have data that show that they are actually effective long term?
Well, what we do know, so more research is needed, and unfortunately, I'm constantly saying this. If you're interested in that, I wrote a piece in Nature magazine that came out in November that specifically talks about all the research that's still needed. But what we do know is it actually, to date, the radical.
You're breaking up just a bit. Me? Yeah, now we can. All right, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Nope.
What I was going to say is the research on the radical flank has documented the way that while the groups that are doing these kinds of tactics are not popular, they never have been popular. If you look back to the civil rights period, groups that were engaging in radical tactics then were not popular. However, what they do is they draw attention to the issue and they draw support for more moderate factions of the movement. And the research that has actually looked at actual climate activism documents that exact process is happening now. There are other folks who have done more abstract research, not on specific actions with a specific people who have experienced the activism, and they have come to differing conclusions, but the work that's gone into the peer review actually does show that quite substantially. We need to do more research, but as a social scientist, I always have to say that. But it's true. We could get a lot more if we did more tailored research.
Dana Fisher, Director of the Center for Environment, Community, and Equity, and Professor at the School of International Service at American University. The book is Saving Ourselves from Climate Shocks to Climate Action. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm and in our podcast and YouTube descriptions, as well as a list of those organizations if folks want to get involved in that now. And to the extent that we have research, it's encouraging that the groups themselves may not be popular, but you're not trying to win a popularity contest. You're trying to create social change. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program, wherein we'll have fun. Arguably. Maybe.
There's a fun Jordan Peterson one today.
There's a fun Jordan Peterson. There's a couple of them. We got a couple of fun ones. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. We cannot do it without you. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only help this show survive and thrive, you also get the free show free of commercials. You get the fun half. You can IM the show with the fun half. You can see me get mocked by IMers, or sometimes get into arguments with IMers, or sometimes, just across the board, all those different things. So good stuff. Check it out. Fun half, more like half membership. I'm not sure I know what that means. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, hot chocolate. When is that happening? When is that? Do we know when that's?
Not next week, but week after.
Okay, so we won't talk about that now. But head over there now. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. I think there's a new logo for. I don't know if they've updated it on the website. Just Coffee. Go to Just Coffee. Let's see if they. JustCoffee.coop. It's co-op, folks, and they take very good care. Did they update the logo? Maybe. Okay. Well, let's. Why don't you tell us about what's happening with Emma, ESVN?
Yeah, so we are dark this week until Emma returns on Thursday from her vacation jaunt. But we will be back on Monday to discuss the end of the Olympics, as well as NFL training camp now coming into full swing as we get closer and closer to the start of the NFL season in September. So we'll definitely be back Monday at 4 p.m. But YouTube.com/ESPN show for any other clips, and if you want to catch up on some of our prior streams.
All right. Well, I got the logo. They have updated the logo, ladies and gentlemen. We have a new 20th anniversary logo for Just Coffee. Pop that up there.
It's in the check your chat.
All right. In the meantime, Left Reckoning, Matt.
Yeah, Left Reckoning tomorrow. Lai Cepeda on talk about the Olympic gender controversy, which seems to be based on very scant evidence and a giant hate campaign against the Algerian boxer. And we'll also be talking about tempers in sports and what's going on in the UK right now. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Come support David and I.
It is stunning. We have a couple of clips talking about how stunning it is. The transphobia is so virulent that people are using a woman who is a good boxer as basically a punching bag to communicate their transphobia.
Imani Khalif, the boxer, said, I think alluded on Twitter to maybe filing legal action, and I hope J.K. Rowling gets sued. Like
oh boy!
That's a big pinata for you.
We'll talk more about this later, but this is like equivalent to like what we were saying about all the anti-trans kids in sports. Like we're just so close to the well, the opposing coaches now will take the next 15 minutes to check the genitalia of the kids playing the team, and they'll go behind the curtain and they'll check the genitalia, and then it's just.
Would hate to be like a female center.
All right. Well, let's. We've got a couple of clips on this. Some people who I think are just sort of, I don't know, stupidity, despicability. It's hard to know. Not necessarily mutually exclusive. Meantime, here is the new Majority Report blend. We've updated it to the logo. 20th anniversary. Look at that. I don't even wear those glasses anymore.
It's hard to represent the clear ones on that type of style.
All right.
Oh, $16.
Quick break. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Cedar! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Oh. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We're back. That was unceremonious. Sam Cedar, Emma Vigeland out today. John in Ohio. I will have no comment on this, but Emma being absent, coincidentally, as Harris is picking VP. Right. Looks like Sam needs a new number 2. Not going to comment on that. Jody from Chicago. Breaking news. Tim Scott married his fiance. Is it true love, or is he hoping Trump dumps Vance for a DEI VP? Ryan from Ohio. All morning I've been thinking about Michael Brooks saying, drag the bear cub to the park. Oh, jeez. Do we have that clip from RFK with yeah.
Are those like decapitated like goat heads that get found in Prospect Park occasionally? Is that Bobby too? Is he doing the Santorini stuff?
No. I mean, look.
Oh, his comes from conservation.
Let's play this clip. I mean, look. I should just say up front, I was not aware of this story. I have heard other stories that aren't quite as crazy as this one. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But 2014, I was doing Ring of Fire with Bobby. This just never came up. Or maybe he didn't want to tell that many people. Apparently, it was coming out in a story in the New Yorker magazine. If this helps Trump voters vote for Kennedy where he is, great. If it keeps people from voting for him who would otherwise vote for Harris, great. I am all in favor of that. It is a strange story. It is not terribly surprising to me, although this one's pretty out there. Here he is with Roseanne, who I should also say is a complete lunatic. And
she's playing the straight man here.
And when Roseanne Barr raises her eyebrows at something you're saying, you know that maybe it's time. You don't want this on video.
I was taking a group of people falconing up in Goshen, New York, up in the Hudson Valley. And I was supposed to meet them there at like maybe 8 or 9. I was driving up maybe, really early, like 7. And that woman in a van in front of me hit a bear and killed it, a young bear. So I pulled over and I picked up the bear and put him in the back of my van because I was going to skin the bear. And it was very good condition, and I was going to put the meat in my refrigerator. And you can do that in New York State. You can get a bear tag for a roadkill bear. And so then we went hawking, and I had the bear in my car.
Pause it for a second. Now, a lot of people would probably stop here and go, it's quite a story. And I'll tell you, I believe it. I totally believe it. There's a decent amount of people at Air America who have stories of like, I heard from one today who had their version of this story, but I've heard this story like a couple of different times. Like, Bobby came in and put a box on my table, and it was like some animal that like was like injured, like I can't remember exactly what, like a squirrel, and he was going to take it home to nurse it back to health. And he's a falconer.
I kind of suspect maybe that's why he told the story is the road. Like, first of all, there's a very small number of people that can relate to that. I know some people who have salvaged roadkill animals in a similar fashion, but like that's a small percentage of even North Dakotans. I think.
Yes, there's not a huge amount of people that do that.
And none of them are falconing.
No. I think he tells the story because he was afraid that it was going to come out in the New Yorker. And so he wanted to dissipate its impact or make sure the story was told right. It gets worse in my estimation.
Then we went hawking, and I had the bear in my car. And then we had a really good day, and we went late. We were catching a lot of game, and the people really loved it, so we just stayed late. And instead of going back to my home in Westchester, I had to go right to the city because there was a dinner at Peter Luger's Steakhouse. And at the end of the dinner, it went late.
Like, I don't know like why you have to say Peter Luger's Steakhouse. It's just weird. But also, and Matt, you'd have a better sense of this. How much time? So if he picks up the bear at 8 a.m., I got to think, well, I guess the point is at the end of dinner, they're like, what are you going to do with that bear now? It's been sitting in your car a little bit long, right? I mean, at one point you got to get the meat into, you got to
out of the hot van, I would probably say.
I don't, maybe it was winter.
That could be. That'd be fine.
If it's winter, you're okay, I guess. But how long do you have? I imagine it's different. Depends on what. Do you want to leave that meat? Just sitting out there. You probably have a day or two at least.
I had to go right to the city because there was a dinner at Peter Luger's Steakhouse. And at the end of the dinner, it went late, and I realized I couldn't go home. I had to go to the airport. And the bear was in my car, and I didn't want to leave the bear in the car, because that would have been bad. So then I thought, at that time, this was a little bit of the redneck in me. There'd been a series of bicycle accidents in New York. They had just put in the bike lanes, and a couple of people had gotten killed, and it was every day, and people had gotten badly injured. Every day it was in the press. And so I thought...
Pause it. Look at Roseanne's face. She's like, where is this going?
Could get another cup of coffee.
Yeah, I'm going to be hitting right on the bourbon right here. Go ahead.
I wasn't drinking, of course, but people were drinking with me who thought this was a good idea. And I said, I had an old bike in my car that somebody asked me to get rid of. I said, let's go put the bear in Central Park and we'll make it look like he got hit by a bike. It'll be funny for people. So everybody thought that's a great idea. So we went and did that, and we thought it would be amusing for whoever found it or something. The next day, it was like, it was on every television station. It was the front page of every paper, and I turned on the TV, and there was like a mile of yellow tape, and there were 20 cop cars. There were helicopters flying over it. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And then there was some people on TV in Tyvek suits with gloves on lifting up the bike, and they're saying they're going to take this up to Albany to get a fingerprinted. And I was worried because my prints were all over that bike. Luckily, the story died down after a while, and it stayed dead for a decade. And the New Yorker somehow found out about it, and they're going to do a big article on me, and that's one of the articles. So they asked me, the fact checker said, it's going to be a bad story.
I think it's a great story.
I mean, look, it's an interesting story, and it's a fun one. I don't know that it's one that you that would have people say like, well, this is presidential material.
Yeah, I don't think you couldn't get in touch with somebody to dispose of a bear carcass. Couldn't have somebody make a few phone calls.
There's level of pranks that are funny, and there are a level of pranks that end up like, there's probably a couple $100,000 invested in that whole reaction, which is not really out of bounds. You find a bear cub in Central Park,
Somebody could have released a live one.
Well, you're thinking, wait a second. Is there a bear living in Central Park that's having babies? Like, where did this bear cub come from? It's not easy to get to Central Park. And there's not just a baby bear. There would be a full bear. Oh, they have a picture with the bear cub. I mean,
the caption says, Kennedy with the carcass of a black bear cub in 2014, in quotes, maybe that's where I got my brain worm, he said.
Well,
it's an interesting
Dave from
pivot
Jamaica
this
says
far.
bear is a good way to get trichinosis. That aside, why admit to planting a bear? Conservatives are very weird people. Oh, yeah, we didn't cover this. We should get this. Dave from upstate. Sam. Hi, Sam. Hope you had a better weekend than Cryall Rittenhouse, who, after disavowing Donald Trump, was transvestigated and bullied so hard they was crying bucked, and he retracted his disavowal. Yeah, it's amazing.
For those wondering, he said that he was going to vote for Ron Paul as the true Second Amendment supporter, and Trump people did not like that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. We'll play that video. We should play that video. Do we have it? There is a video.
Okay.
I know there is
Let me
a
do-
video
double
of
check.
him doing it. That's where he did his disavowal. In the meantime, here is, let's see, what should we start with? Let me just say this. The corollary to being a vice presidential potential pick and having to go out there and defend yourself for stuff that you've said or written or positions you've had doesn't speak well to what you're going to bring to the ticket. It's also a problem if you are the actual vice presidential pick and your wife is deployed to go out and justify comments that you made that came to light like a week or two earlier. If that story is still going on that long, where your wife has come out and you're the VP pick, again, you're not the you're just the one who's supposed to be the cherry on top, not the castor oil sprinkled on the sundae. Here is Usha Vance defending her husband, J.D. Vance's childless cat lady's comment as a quip. Incidentally, he made this comment more than once and substantiated it in various other places and doubled down on the concept of it. Go ahead.
There are a few comments that are out there that I have to ask you about. In 2021, JD said, "We are effectively run by a bunch of childless cat ladies taking aim at government leaders who don't have children." What was your reaction?
Well, I mean, I took a moment to look and actually see what he had said and try to understand what the context was and all that, which is something that I really wish people would do a little bit more often. And the reality is,
you know what I would do if it was my husband? I would ask him. But which it makes me feel like a little bit like she's being a little disingenuous here. Go back.
To look and actually see what he had said and try to understand what the context was and all that, which is something that I really wish people would do a little bit more often. And the reality is, he made a quip in service of making a point that he wanted to make that was substantive, and it had actual meaning. And I just wish sometimes that people would talk about those things and that we would spend a lot less time just sort of going through this 3-word phrase or that 3-word phrase, because what he was really saying is that it can be really hard to be a parent in this country. And sometimes our policies are designed in a way that make it even harder. And we should be asking ourselves, why is that true? What is it about our leadership and the way that they think about the world that makes it so hard sometimes for parents? And that's the conversation that I really think that we should have. And I understand why he was saying that.
Oh, pause it. I'd be happy to have that conversation. It doesn't go with, it's because that there are women who don't have kids in a polite way to refer. No, it's because of capitalism. It's because actually your husband voted against the one measure that we've been able to institute in decades that overnight, over the course of a year, diminished child poverty and took 7 million families out of poverty. And that was the child tax credit. And had J.D. Vance said, I'm going to vote for this bill, I want this included in the IRA, it would have forced Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema to vote for it too, because they would have been like, oh, I'm a Democrat. We've got this Republican coming out to vote for it. Now, I don't think, to be fair, he was in the Senate when that vote actually happened, but he wasn't out there running on this. He could have come out and said, like, I want to reintroduce this bill. In fact, I think we just had a vote in the Senate 6 days ago on at least partially a child tax credit, $1,800. It wasn't the full that we had during COVID. So it wasn't $300 a month. It was closer to an extra $150 a month. And I think J.D. Vance skipped that vote. I think he skipped that vote.
He is not saying it's so hard for some people that they want to have kids, but it's just like, what is she hinting at? The economy for working?
Oh yeah,
people,
no,
whatever?
that's what she's hinting at. But I will give the best possible reading. He made a quip where he criticized women who were barren, according to him. He said it in a funny way. But women who decide not to have children.
AOC, Kamala Harris, and Pete Buttigieg.
Yep. Although Pete Buttigieg actually has a kid.
No, does that kid?
But his point was it's hard on parents. Well, dude had an opportunity 6 days ago to make it much easier on parents. Guess what he did? 0. It doesn't seem like maybe Usha's even talking to him because she had to go back and do her own research on this. Yeah. Maybe you should actually go and check his voting record while you're there too.
Because what he actually said was that it's not anything to do with sort of economic pressure. It's people because of feminism or LGBTism or whatever are deciding not to have parents, and also making the people who do decide to have parents feel bad about their choice.
Yeah, exactly.
It's purely cultural.
Totally cultural. Vegetable Sauce says it's okay to insult someone if you understand the broader context, but also the broader context doesn't matter.
There's a good context for calling people cat ladies.
It really is.
Because I'm talking about the economy. Even though I'm a guy who said that sort of state or public daycare is for weird people.
So the Republicans and more seem to think that, maybe since our entire campaign strategy of calling Joe Biden both a puppet master and an old man is now out the window because Joe Biden's no longer the nominee. They are desperately seeking something new to run on. And they already had to have a team meeting and say, we cannot be overt about racism. And they're searching around the stuff about like the cultural war against women and feminism who didn't want to have children or couldn't have children. That sort of flopped. So what do you do when you're a Republican? Well, you go back to the old standby. And that is, of course, transphobia for the Republicans. Here is Donald Trump at an Atlanta rally. I imagine everybody knows the story of Iman Khalif now. She is a boxer from Algeria. And she beat an Italian woman. I think she just clinched the bronze medal today.
A bronze, yeah. You can get, there's apparently the two losers get a bronze with the way that the system's set up.
And, but the Italian woman, I'm not a boxing expert, but people who follow boxing, like, she dropped her hands and she got punched in the face. She quit. Fine. I don't think anybody should be boxing, frankly. But she said, I'd never been hit that hard before. And Khalif is, at least genetically, what is known as intersex. Supposedly has an XY chromosome.
And that's, I would underline.
And that's arguable.
Yeah.
But that is a ruling of one boxing association, which apparently much of the world no longer recognizes, had determined. In the Olympics, at least in terms of boxing, they go by what's on your passport. In Algeria, you're not allowed to be transgender. There is no way to change your gender on official government documents. It is consistent with your birth gender. So according to Algeria, and according to, I guess, I don't know if we know for sure, but according to her, she has a uterus. She's definitely not transgender. she identifies as a woman, and so does in Algeria.
And there's pictures of her as a little girl.
But that doesn't stop the right and others, apparently, from trying to make this a campaign issue. I give you Donald Trump.
If Kamala Harris gets in, the travesty that is taking place at the Paris Olympics will come to America when we host the Los Angeles Olympics. And by the way, which I was president, we happened to get it. I was the president. I also got you a thing called the World Cup, which is coming very soon.
Percentage of people there know what the World Cup is?
Also, check out that packed house.
It's a little sparse up top, isn't it? And that's the same place where Harris was, right? And they, I noticed they took a lot more down by the dais too. They took a lot more space, but wow, there's some big.
Even in the middle, even in the lower rows, there's some rows out there.
Wow, that's okay. Well, all right. Maybe the tickets were expensive.
It myself, because nobody else will say it, but I got them both, and you're going to have a lot of fun with it, I hope. Harris is a radical trans activist, and she is the candidate of letting men beat up women in the name of tolerance. But you look at what's happening over in Paris, it will never happen here. I will never let it happen. I will get all males off your daughter's soccer teams and volleyball teams and get them out of your locker rooms once and for all. That's going to be cleaned up, and we will.
How many people in that stadium, convention hall, whatever it is, go, oh, thank God, because we have so many males on my daughter's soccer team. Like, they all think they know somebody who has that problem in a neighboring school.
He's training them all to, like, to the extent that they watch any sort of Little League, it's going to be as some sort of freak paranoid looking for some sort of person trying to pass.
We have already talked about the implications of this. And we have a couple of examples of kids having to have their genitalia inspected to make sure that they're actually girls. The idea that they're having to return to the transphobia, the only thing I can tell you, as horrific as it is for trans people, because they're going to be subject to, the next wave of, and I don't know that it really actually, the last one subsided in any meaningful manner, of hateful transphobia. It's going to inspire more, right-wing legislatures to pass legislation, because you can get away with this in red states. I mean, 15 years ago, you could get away with passing anti-Sharia laws because they were afraid that, Indiana was become a no-go state or something, because there was going to be so much. You can do this if you're in deep red country or just red country. But as an electoral matter, this is not helpful for the Republicans. They dumped $50 million into Michigan in 2022, and it failed. And this is why, but why are the Republicans talking about this? Is because it gives them something to sort of shift the conversation. And why are we talking about it? Is just so that, A, we can point out they're desperate. They're trying to change the conversation. And B, the reason why we talk about it is to remind you that A, there is no electoral salience for this issue at all. And B, this is a question of human rights. Here is Francesca Fiorentini on ostensibly a progressive show, making the argument that this is all BS. But apparently, even after 2022, where We know the implications of this electorally. Some people still haven't gotten the message.
So, first of all, when you have an extreme
Obviously you
position, you have an extreme position that says, no, we don't ever ask anyone. And I think the Olympics position is actually absurd. They don't do any genetic testing. They don't do any testing. So you could, since they don't do any testing at all, you can just walk in, call yourself a female, not be trans. Trans people are actually
Do it, Jane. Do it.
Okay, yeah, all right. Well, you could say it, but then what's going to happen?
Pause it. Incidentally, just as a factual matter, this is not true. In boxing, the IOC just requires a passport that says your gender. If your passport says you're male and you walk in there, now, I don't know how you walk into the Olympics. Like, I'm pretty good at softball, but I don't think I could just walk into the Olympics. I'm not bad at archery, but I don't think I could walk into the Olympics and, get on the American. There's, incidentally, all of these teams, there are organizations that police these questions in their home countries. In Algeria, again, you cannot be transgender. There is no passport that you can get that says female unless you were born female.
And there's pictures of her as a little girl.
Yes. But I'm just talking about the factual matter.
Right.
The Olympics just say walk in. No, the Olympics basically defer to international organizations that create the rules for different sports. Now, you could say, well, that organization is, I don't like this organization. I don't like that organization. I like the way they do it with that one. But as a factual matter, the idea that you can walk into the Olympics as a woman and play men's basketball is obviously absurd. In fact, you can't walk into the Olympics even if you're a man and play men's basketball because there's a process.
Do it.
Okay, yeah, all right, well, you could say it, but then what's going to happen?
Rugby,
Somebody's going to do it, and they're going to get away with it, and then everybody's going to be furious, okay? It's, all right, I can't stand it. And it doesn't help trans people at all to have these extreme positions. Oh, yeah, don't test anyone, just take their word for it. I think it's terrible politics.
It's not an extreme position. It comes from a position of human rights, and it does help all
It's not a human right to compete in the other genders'
What you see there is when what you just saw are women, are biological women, being attacked for being trans because of the anti-trans athletic narrative that has already festered and has now come for these women. And so what are the women to do? Say, I'm not a man. In fact, screw, I'm not a trans man. Are you kidding me? No. We all stand in solidarity together. That's how we actually fight the right when it comes to their bull crap culture wars that lead nowhere, and it doesn't serve. Look, I understand, Cenk. You're in the majority. You're in the majority. I'm in the minority. Most people disagree that trans athletes should participate in Olympic sports. Most people don't agree with me. But hell, man, I'm willing to stand on a hill that is unpopular and fight for people and for their human rights.
Yeah, look, we could spend an hour debating this, and I have in the past. But when...
Not really, though.
Yeah.
Not really. Not really debate, more of an agreement.
Okay, whatever. I'm happy to debate anybody about it. I think I don't agree, and you're never going to get me to agree by saying it's the left-wing position, it's the pro-trans position. I don't think it's a pro-trans position at all.
You should just offer a platform.
Okay.
You don't have to agree.
All right. So when your opponent is in the middle of doing something radical, step out of the way and let them do it instead of stepping in the way and saying, hey, I'm more radical. Okay, I think it's terrible politics. It's terrible for trans people.
First of all right, we don't need to go further. There's absolutely zero data points to support the idea that defending trans people is bad politics. You can look at polls that say whatever, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80% of people think that biological, that people born as a man, assigned the gender of a man at birth should not be, playing softball or whatever it is. But as an electoral matter, people don't care. At the end of the day, people don't care. I mean, we have seen much, in some instances, to my dismay and to others' dismay, 70, 80% of people want gun control. But point to me an election that has turned on it. It's just not high enough on people's priorities in terms of when it comes to voting. Trans for normal people, i.e. non-cultural warrior right-wingers. Trans issues are number 25 on the list of things that they would vote for or vote upon, because for the most part, people are like, it doesn't affect me. And like, it doesn't seem to affect, like, you know, it's one thing to say, okay, we're going to allow sporting associations to police their sports. And I'm going to lobby the sports organization to do this, or I'm going to lobby the sports organization to do that. But I don't know what difference it makes if you were born you were assigned a female gender at birth, and you've chosen male gender, you know, at age 25. I don't know how that impacts your archery. Let the archery association figure it out. But to make it a political issue, to accept that it's a political issue, is a right-wing frame. I don't care if you think that no trans people should be allowed to play in, you know, shot put or whatever it is. But when you start talking about it as a political issue, you just have there's zero support. That's just you playing out some type of fantasy in your head.
Yeah, we need to respond to a hypothetical Joanna Man scenario when we have actually a real situation staring us in the face. And guess what? It's the right wing being hysterical about this once again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I just resent the constant, like, the left needs to get their shit together. No, like, some of the people in the media need to get their shit together.
Yeah. Mama Feastalies, I can't pronounce that. I'd like to point out trans people have been allowed in the Olympics for over 20 years, and we have yet to dominate like Jenkins fear-mongering about. Not a single medal has gone to a trans person playing in a different gender from their AGAP. I don't know what that stands for, but like their gender assigned at birth. Oh, that's what it is. It doesn't help trans people, says the cis guy who's demonstrated his ignorance multiple times. Jenkins pretending to be an ally to be transphobic, utterly vile. Nova, this is also the perfect issues to call the Republicans weird on. 100%. When Donald Trump says to a stadium full of people, I'm going to be the one who gets that male off your girls' soccer team, 85% of the country just goes like, what are you talking about, dude? And the other, like, 15%, the majority of those just think they know somebody. In fact, not just the majority, like almost every single 9.9 out of 10.
And I find the argument kind of hard to, like, it seems like a bit of a logical reach, and I guess I'm maybe giving them too much credit here, but the idea of, like, pinning this on Kamala Harris, that, like, an Algerian boxer fighting an Italian boxer at a world athletic event is somehow in some way a referendum on Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's stewardship of what exactly?
No, this is like talking about, like, there's a caravan forming in, Paraguay.
Yeah, right.
And it's going to be here in 9 months.
On election day.
And it's absurd. We got to talk about this. If we don't talk about it, the Democrats going to lose. Give me a break. Jesus.
You want to do the Jordan Shapiro or Jordan Peterson, Elon Musk?
Sure. This is an old one, right?
Yeah, it's about a couple weeks old, but
this is worth doing.
Because Elon is like not the weirdest guy in an interview.
Yeah, Elon Musk went on with Jordan Peterson to make himself look in some way mainstream. We should say Elon Musk is being investigated by the state of Michigan. He dumped $45 million a month into a PAC. First, he said he was going to support Trump. Then he pretended like he wasn't, but he's still dumping this money into this PAC that essentially tries to target. And there's some question as to like who he's trying to target on social media. He also owns one of these platforms, so he's probably like paying himself off to like drive his ad rates on Twitter. But he's trying to pinpoint certain voters, and there's some question as to whether he's providing this information. It's supposedly like to register voters, but all he's doing is putting them into a data bank to assess whether they are supportive of Trump. And if they are, then go and register them and get them out to vote. Now, that's illegal. If you're an organization that registers voters, you need to be nonpartisan, not just in your rhetoric. In fact, your rhetoric is the minimum. What you can't do is say, oh, we took all these registration forms. We're throwing out the ones that people don't vote for Trump. That's illegal. People go to prison for that.
It's not free speech.
It is not free speech. But before he got some acclaim for that, here he is with Jordan Peterson as they discuss the benefits of a strictly meat diet.
It's a hard sell from Jordan here.
Price.
Carnivore diet will fix that.
The what, sorry?
The carnivore diet will fix that.
Look, I like meat. I'm pro meat. I don't think a carnivore diet is going to fix this particular issue. I think
my wife had an injury of 40 years,
okay,
and it resolved in 2 years on the carnivore diet.
Wait, what is he saying before him? What is the problem that he's supposed to be dealing with here?
Right.
Yes.
Let's just, I mean, that is just a ridiculously false statement.
So one of the things I've tried to do is to understand. So, like, there are a limited number of things that are undeniably real, and pain is one of them.
Yes.
Okay.
Like
so
my back hurts a little.
Yes. So that's because you were up till 5 a.m.
No, I just have some injuries, whatever.
From wrestling?
It's from, I think, some childhood injuries that, although the final thing that caused some back and shoulder injuries was me foolishly fighting the world champion sumo wrestler and charging him at him at full speed to knock him over, which I did succeed in doing, but
you paid a price for it.
A very, very high price.
Carnivore diet will fix that.
The what, sorry?
The carnivore diet will fix that.
Look, I like
Pause
meat.
it for a second. First of all, like, just, this is one of the creepiest interviews. This is...
They should have, like, maybe outlined a little bit.
It's just a weird, like, there's like a weird, like, almost like weird, I don't want to say sexual tension, but like, there's almost like just a weird, like, sort of like, weird man crush tension that Peterson had. Like, Peterson seems so desperate to impress Musk. And Musk, of course, is desperate to just seem normal. And Peterson's so weird that it's like, it is just a weird, there's a weirdness to this that is, go ahead.
Paid a price for it.
A very, very high price.
Carnivore diet will fix that.
The what, sorry?
The carnivore diet will fix that.
Look, I like meat. I'm pro meat. I don't think a carnivore diet is going to fix this particular issue. I think
my wife had an injury of 40 years,
okay,
and it resolved in 2 years on the carnivore diet.
Yeah, pause it. Pause it.
Steak or something?
This guy puts himself out there as a doctor, as a scientist. He complains about junk science all the time.
He's a big Fauci critic.
My wife had a physical ailment for 40 years. You have a back problem? My wife had a physical ailment for 40 years, ate meat for 2 years, and it was resolved. Like, I mean, just there's so much that's so magical thinking based. And I will just say this, I don't want to give away the secret too much, but the meat that she ate started with the letter S. So any meat you eat with the letter S at the beginning fixes your various physical ailments, because my wife had one. Now she doesn't. So what do you think about that?
Me foolishly fighting the world champion sumo wrestler and charging him at full speed to knock him over, which I did succeed in doing, but
you paid a price for it.
A very, very high price.
Carnivore diet will fix that.
The what, sorry?
The carnivore diet will fix that.
Look, I like meat. I'm pro meat. I don't think a carnivore diet is going to fix this particular issue. I think
my wife had an injury of 40 years, and it resolved in 2 years on a carnivore diet.
If you just eat steak or something?
Yeah.
I mean,
all beef.
All beef.
Sure.
Yes, anything that starts with a B.
I'm a pro. I like meat. But I think this is I think I'll probably need an operation or something. But anyway.
I tried the carnivore diet first. Anyways, that did happen to her.
Okay.
She couldn't lift her left arm above here. It took 40 years, and in 2 years it resolved.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was something to see.
Pause it for a second. Like, honestly, like, never mind a guy who considers himself a doctor. If I'm sitting at a bar and it's 2 a.m. and I'm wasted talking to a guy who's also wasted, and this guy says this to me, I'm going to go like, I don't know, dude. Maybe it could have been other things.
At this time, change the subject.
No.
I've been clear. I'm not interested.
I want to make it absolutely clear. First off, everybody knows can't lift your arm above here. Same as a back problem.
Clearly not enough burgers.
And if my wife ate only beef for 2 years and it resolved itself, clearly that's why. So I'm a doctor.
I like meat. But I think this is I think I'll probably need an operation or something. But anyway.
I tried the carnivore diet.
Sure.
Anyways, that did happen to her.
Okay.
She couldn't lift her left arm above here. It took 40 years, and in 2 years it resolved.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was something to see. It also rejuvenated her physically in a variety of different ways that were quite miraculous to watch.
Yeah.
And that hasn't stopped. So that's a weird thing, and I would have never believed it if I hadn't seen this, because it's so preposterous.
Sure.
Anyways, I'm not going to proselytize about the bloody carnivore diets.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to
proselytize.
I'm going to proselytize.
Proselytize.
I think the guy's worse than I am with pronouncing things. Yeah, no, it was crazy. This is like, honestly, like he thinks he's being rational because he says, I never expected it. I was completely blown away. I started to do this and this one crazy thing happened, and click through and watch my video and you'll find out what it was. And it was an all beef diet.
Yeah.
That saved my wife. A lot of other things happened too.
That guy could very easily be like a Billy Mays for like a all meat diet style, like QVC.
That's what I'm saying. It's complete funnel marketing.
2 a.m.
I, for one, never believed it was possible. But then this one thing happened that changed my life. Click through. Watch the video until the end.
Meef Riddler.
Use coupon code BEEF. Get 20% off.
I think I'll probably need a operation on this, but anyway.
That's right. Her rejuvenation has not stopped. It used to be, it was miraculous. She could only raise her arm to here, and now she can literally move her arm all the way 360. She has absolutely no cartilage in her shoulder anymore and can use her arm like a total windmill. In fact, I have glued her to the ceiling, and she can function as a ceiling fan. That's how miraculous it's been. In fact, She has no ability to stop her arms from raising over her head and going around in a windmill.
We can thank God that Elon was uninterested enough to ask the follow-up, what sort of miraculous rejuvenations? Could you be more specific about that?
Well, she has the ability to her legs also. Had you ever seen the Flintstones when their legs move like wheels? This is what her legs do now because of the meat, 100% beef diet.
Sirloin. The what, sorry? The carnivore diet will fix that. The what, sorry? That's my favorite.
It's true. I know. I didn't believe it at the time either.
Normal guys.
Normal. So normal. This is, should we play? I don't know. This Daniel Levy stuff is pretty good. Mehdi Hassan hosted an Al Jazeera event, which included a couple of panelists. Manuel Nevan, Tel Aviv University lecturer. Benny Morris, formerly of the sort of new historians who got all the documents from the Israeli government in the 80s that showed that the narrative of who was living in Palestine and who wasn't, and what kind of society existed prior to the establishment of Israel was wrong. He subsequently found it too difficult, I guess, to live with that reality.
You gotta do what you gotta do is his position now.
But here's the first clip. Levy was a member of the Israeli government. He was one of the negotiators for the Oslo Accords, I believe it was, right? In 1993. We've interviewed him many times over the years. Here he is.
Next to recent MR guest Diana Boutu.
Yep.
The only country in the Middle East where Arabs can elect their officials, be elected, be judges at the Supreme Court, be president of a university. The only free country in the Middle East is Israel.
Daniel, do you want to respond to that?
I find it staggering that the gentleman to my right is telling the Palestinian citizen of Israel how she is experiencing the reality under which she lives. It's a staggering moment for me. Now, there were different strands to Zionism, okay? There was a cultural Zionism, there was a binational Zionism. This could have gone in different directions. From the perspective of 2024, 75 plus years in, the idea that this is just something benign doesn't match with the reality that has been lived. Now, I would say it's clear what this has meant for Palestinians, but I would argue it's not doing what was written on the tin for Jews either. I don't think either Israeli Jewish or global Jewish safety is best served by the actions we see day in, day out in Gaza.
In other words, the whole narrative that Israel is what keeps Jews safe is the opposite. First off, if you have an attack on October 7th, that is the worst attack in 75 years against Jews since the Holocaust, there's something gone horribly wrong with your project to protect Jews. If you invoke Jews and Judaism in your genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crime ridden assault on the people of Gaza, or frankly, the West Bank at this point, and points earlier, you're putting Jews in harm's way. And that's coming from a guy who was part of the Israeli government. Let's play the second clip. Daniel Levy again. Benny Morris, who again was a historian who was part of the new historians in the 80s, who got access for the first time to documents that showed exactly, what was done to the Palestinian people in the founding of Israel. Massacres and wholesale expulsion, stealing of land, put to lie the idea of the Palestinians decided to walk away and then got upset. Ilan Pappé, also part of that group. When the Israelis decided we're going to relock up all those documents because we don't like what it's revealing about our origins, some of those historians decided, the writing's on the wall, and this is not a recipe. I don't want to go down this road. It's as if Eric Foner, who took a look at Reconstruction, and the more actual academic research that was done, they found these stories of Reconstruction that black people weren't able to actually effectively lead are not true. What actually happened is there were massacres across the South of black politicians, and they were driven out. That there was a concerted effort by former plantation owners and some northern industrialists to reestablish at least some regime that wasn't slavery, but that had some of the economic benefits of slavery, like low-cost labor. It's as if Eric Foner decided at one point, no, this is actually going to hurt me in the academy. So
I'm with DeSantis now because I want to go dine out in Florida.
Yeah. Here is Benny Morris.
Daniel Levy. When I was in a Zionist youth movement and president of the World Junior Jewish Students, being pumped with the talking points and the propaganda points, I really think they were more sophisticated, and I may be misremembering this. I genuinely cannot believe that this is what now constitutes an Israeli attempt at defending and putting your best foot forward. But then I look at the reality in Israel today, and of course that's what it should look like, because what's the reality we're living in? And let me take two snapshots. First of all, it's really not that surprising that we've got to this point when you consider the impunity with which the external community and Israel's allies and the West and the US treat Israel, despite the litany, the entire spectrum of violations of international law and of human rights. And yet every time there's an excuse, there's a veto at the United Nations, then there's more arms. And in that respect, don't expect Israelis to come up with better talking points when they don't have to, because you're willing to run cover for them and create completely the wrong incentive structure.
Please respond briefly.
I must protest. You've brought three people in a panel, two of whom are pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist.
That's the purpose of the panel, yes.
It's supposed to be two against one. That's the way you've organized this.
Yes, we did ask you to watch the show before you came in.
I consider myself pro-Jewish,
no, you're not
pro-Palestinian, pro-human. I consider myself...
Let me finish. Please. Let me finish. You are a pro-Palestinian propagandist. That's all you've become, just so that you know that.
The idea of being like a pro-Palestinian propagandist, if 30 years since Oslo, 31 years since Oslo, if 31 years of engaging with your country, at first as a government official and then as a a scholar, essentially, turns you into a pro-Palestinian propagandist, it's probably for good reason. I mean, that if that's the perception, and I've interviewed Levy probably for over the course of 20 of those years, and there is no doubt, I mean, in my mind, like his evolution is like, I think it's similar. If you were conscious of Israel's actions 20, 25 years ago, at one point over the course of that time, it becomes increasingly clear that their actions, very often even their rhetoric now, does not comport with the sort of the narrative that we're led to believe, that there's no partner for peace on the other side, that Israel only wants peace, that it's not an expansionist project. And again, there was a brief window in which these documents were released in the 80s, and it's taken a long time for the dissemination. I think early on this show we played that documentary by Benny Bruner, but I didn't, I guess maybe he even made that in the aughts, I feel like. Arguing the existence of a Palestinian society and culture. This was not like just some tents in the desert that at least some of us grew up being taught.
There's some more from that, Benny Morris, if you want.
Let's just see a little bit more.
This is, this guy, and it gets on the question of, Morris just straight up denies that anybody has died from malnutrition in Palestine, which is just a pretty heinous lie. But this is another question here from the audience for Morris.
I'm Martin Shaw, and I wrote a book called What is Genocide?
Perfect person. What is genocide,
to bring
Martin?
Benny back to Gaza, because you said it's a war, and there's collateral damage, and that Hamas knew. And that may be true. But, I mean, the real point is that Israel knew, isn't it? That if you bend the rules of war so that 100 people can be killed for one militant, if you do that thousands and thousands of times with 2,000-pound bombs, you know that the whole of Gaza is going to be a ruin. You know that you're going to destroy that society. And that the only way we can understand that in an overall sense is not a series of war crimes. It is one big crime, and I think the name for that is genocide.
Absolutely. Do you want to respond to that? Hold on, let him respond.
I think I've already made the point. The Hamas, when it attacked Israel on the 7th of October, knew that Israel would retaliate with bombing and knew that lots of Gazan civilians would die. They were hoping for that because that looks good on Western television images. But they say that killing a lot of Gaza civilians is good because they go to heaven. They become martyrs. So this is
Benny,
allowed.
Benny, can I ask you a question? Can I hold on?
Did I say something wrong?
No, I just want to follow your logic.
The Hamas knew that.
I just want to follow your logic. Your argument is Hamas knew that if they did this, we'd do a genocide, so we did a genocide.
Not genocide, no. You're misusing.
Like they knew that we would come and kill lots of people, so we did. It's a very weird argument.
They knew that Israel would kill lots of Gazans.
They knew that Israel would kill lots of Gazans. Not a great
Yes, they knew that. Going after the Hamas, they knew that lots of Gazan civilians would be killed, and they were happy with this because of international pressure which would result.
Okay, we're running out of time. I want to take a gentleman in the suit. Yes.
Benny Morris, you say that the ICC should issue an arrest warrant against the Israeli Prime Minister and the Israeli War Minister, Yoav Gallant. But on the 9th of October, they imposed a total siege on 2.3 million civilians in Gaza, depriving them of water, medicine, food. That is what they're accused of, starvation as a weapon of war, something that the Syrian and the Russian regimes were accused of. Do you condemn that?
Has anybody died in Gaza of starvation?
Yes, Benny.
This is total nonsense. The Israeli. You want me to answer?
Yes, I do.
Do you want me to answer?
But I want some evidence. You can't just say things that are false. I'm not going to let you say that.
The Israeli government, I think the ministers debated whether to cut off water, cut off electricity, etc., etc. They eventually resolved not to do that. And though lots of reporters have been saying, and the United Nations, that Gaza is on the verge of starvation, on the verge of famine, etc., etc., that has not happened.
Benny, how do you know that? How do you know that? Hold on, stop heckling. How do you know that, Benny? And please,
I haven't
talk. You don't
read
just have to
any
do it.
report of anyone dying of
There have been
starvation.
many reports.
I haven't read any.
So that makes it nonsense because you haven't read any.
I haven't heard of anybody
You don't think there's a
dying
famine?
of starvation.
You don't think there's a famine
no,
in northern Gaza?
No, I think there's a food problem there. Food
Do you think there's a famine in northern Gaza?
I don't know what the word famine means. There is a food problem. There's malnutrition. This I have heard.
But nobody's died. They've all conveniently stayed alive.
As far as I know, nobody has died of starvation in the Gaza Strip, as far as I know.
I've read quotes from you saying you're a historian, you look at the sources, you find the evidence, and now you're like, I don't know what famine means, I haven't seen anything. I mean, it's a big claims you're making. You should back it up with some evidence.
Okay, first off, famine is actually like a technical term. It literally deals with, it must include deaths from malnutrition. And then I think you go from like famine to extreme famine, and it must include food deprivation for a certain percentage of the people within a region. And every agency that is in charge of assessing this has said that at least northern Gaza was in famine conditions. You're near famine conditions in other parts of the country. We have witnessed video of Israelis blowing up water processing plants. We have seen Israelis lay their bodies down in front of aid trucks so that food wouldn't make it. We saw the U.S. government attempt to build a pier to deliver food. Why was that? Why did they need to do that? Why did they need to do airdrops? Because Israel was using food as a weapon of war. There's just no, like, I don't know what you have to read, what deprivation tank you have to be in to not be aware of these things.
Or even to claim that.
Yes!
There are here, just one piece from June. Nearly 6-month-old Fayez Ataya and 13-year-old Abdulkar Al-Suri both died from malnutrition and lack of access to healthcare on 30th May and 1 June 2024. Like, how I believe that he hasn't read, doesn't know that, because I don't know how a historian could make a claim that is so contrary to that. There's all sorts of names of people that have been documented died of malnutrition in this.
It's crazy.
I think he genuinely didn't. I believe him when he says I haven't read that.
What should we do here? Do we do Dave Rubin? Because we may be on a Rubin break for a while.
It's gonna be Rubin's gonna be on pre-record for a while. He's taking his August break.
Oh, should we tell this JD Vance story? Yeah, this is, look. This is number 5, right? I think this is the. Well, maybe we could play 5 and 6. I have kids. And they really do and my kids are, they think anything that they want is urgent. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. And they don't have any type of sweetie, I'm talking on the phone with somebody for work. Okay, but can I have a ba-ba-ba? All right, no, I'm on the phone.
We're starting the show in 5 minutes.
No, exactly. Exactly. Dude, I do a show every day. And in my mind, have I thought, you got to be effing kidding me that you're doing this, when I've just told you 4 times I've got the show in a minute. But I would not say that to the kids because they're kids. Here is what JD Vance tells us he told his son. Now, maybe he did or maybe he didn't, but I have a comment on that too.
So I'm like, oh no. So I call Trump and I'm like, hey, sir, what's going on? He's like, JD, you missed a very important phone call. And now I'm going to have to pick somebody else.
Oh, pause it for a second. Okay, so he's saying that he had gotten a phone call. He saw that Donald Trump had called him, and he's like, he missed it. And so he called him back. All right, so go. Start at the beginning.
So I'm like, oh no. So I call Trump and I'm like, hey, sir, what's going on? He's like, JD, you missed a very important phone call. And now I'm going to have to pick somebody else. And I like tense up and almost have a heart attack. And the crazy thing about it is my son, who's 7, is in the hotel room with me. And he's really into Pokemon cards right now. He's going through a Pokemon phase. Are you guys into Pokemon?
I was back in the day.
Okay,
Yeah, that's a big phase right now, I think, in general.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's really into it. So he's trying to talk to me about Pikachu. And I'm on the phone with Donald Trump. And I'm like, son, shut the hell up for 30 seconds about Pikachu. This is the most important phone call of my life. Please just let me take this phone call. So
now, okay, look. I think everybody can agree, like, that's sort of a mean way to talk to your 7-year-old son, who clearly doesn't understand. And I don't know, maybe his son is very, very smart. And he's like, Donald Trump, Dad, get off the phone. He's a douchebag. But let's just assume for a moment that the son doesn't understand. He's like a normal 7-year-old who just wants the Pikachu. Now, I think it's okay for, I mean, he said that to his son. Do I think in my head, it's not crazy for him in his head to have gone like, kid, shut up. I'm on the phone with the guy. He's going to make me vice president. I think that's actually a normal, relatable response. I don't know if J.D. Vance actually said, shut up to his 7-year-old son. That's a little messed up in my head. But what's also even more weird is that you are now nominated to be vice president. You're talking about how important family is. And you, to show off in front of these bros, feel like you gotta have said, shut up, son. Like, I mean, I get it. If I'm going on, Cross's podcast, he hasn't invited me, incidentally. That's all right. I'm not mad about it. And I say this to friends of mine who are comedians because I'm not running for vice president. Now, I could say, like, I'm thinking, but I don't say to my kid, like, shut up, I'm on the phone. Care about Pikachu right now. And if I did, I wouldn't brag about it in public when I'm trying to. This is when people say they're weird. This is what they mean. They don't know how they come off. And they're so self-confident about how they come off. And they're so clearly trying to communicate something that they're communicating something different. Here he is complaining about this at that rally in Atlanta. They don't know how weird they are. They're weird.
Remember, Barack Obama said we cling to God and guns. Remember that? Hillary Clinton called us deplorables. And now Kamala Harris says we're weird. Well, Kamala, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about some things that are weird. We think it's weird that Democrats want to put sexually explicit books in toddlers' libraries.
Pause it. Toddlers.
The Brooklyn Toddler Library.
Toddlers' libraries. First off, none of that's true. But can toddlers read? I don't.
The very easy reframe of this is Republicans think they need to assign sort of legal monitors of libraries because librarians are trying to corrupt kids, which is insane hysteria.
Yes. Because I got news for you. Everybody's gone into their school library or their, toddler's library. When you're a toddler in school, there's books there, but how old is a toddler? Goes up to like 4, right? Or, I mean,
it's pretty small.
You can't read. The kids, like parents would have
Picture
to read it. But okay. It's weird that he thinks there's a lot of like people in America who are thinking about this.
Yeah, might be projection.
We think it's weird that the far left wants to allow biological males to beat the living crap out of women in boxing.
Again, promoting a total lie in every single fashion.
Yeah.
But also, it's weird to be focused on that.
And he has a habit of focusing on the Olympics in sort of weird ways. He was also, as we just said, commenting on Simone Biles, who now is a multi-gold time winner.
Right.
But in 2020 was saying,
Thought
she
she was
should have get up
weak
there.
for
Yeah.
getting the twisties and good.
In boxing. We think it's weird for a presidential candidate to bail convicted rapists and murderers out of prison, and that's what Kamala Harris did.
What?
And I think it's especially weird when Kamala Harris comes to Atlanta. I believe came here to this arena. Kamala Harris comes to Atlanta and talks with a fake Southern accent, even though she grew up in Canada. You can't make it up. That's pretty weird. Go watch the clip. She sounded like a Southern belle.
Okay,
even though
Meemaw.
she grew up in Vancouver. It doesn't make any sense. But on November 5th, she can go back to using her San Francisco accent because we're going to send her packing and we're going to reelect Donald J. Trump, President of the United States.
She grew up in Vancouver, but she has a San Francisco accent? I mean, it's on the same coast, I guess.
What's the San Francisco accent? That's that hard San Francisco twang.
I mean, at least they're embracing their weirdness. Because the thing that people find weird is that like they're so obsessed with athletes' genitalia and the idea of sexualizing children. And that's all they talk about when they're running for president and vice president.
Yeah. Is that what Usha means when she says JD knows all about how hard it is to raise families? Is, you know, all the men on the Little League girls soccer team?
Yeah. He also is not terribly charismatic.
No.
I guess I don't know if I'm surprised. I think that's what we got, right? Or what? Oh, should we talk about this Rogan thing? No, we're out of time. We'll do some IMs. We'll get to some of this tomorrow. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to be talking about what's going on in Venezuela to the extent that we can know. Audio filter, infuriating op-ed in CNN, Palestinian-American orthopedic surgeon recently attempting to return to Gaza as part of a medical aid mission, denied entry due to his Palestinian roots. Edward Said fan club. I would love to see y'all cover the student revolution in Bangladesh. The prime minister just resigned and fled the country this morning. Beautiful scenes of celebration in the streets all across the country. Yeah, we have a long list of what we need to talk about. Billy Maher Harris picked Shapiro according to a new leak over the weekend? Question mark. I didn't. I don't
Who
know if I
knows?
buy that.
But I will say the betting markets have swung wildly against Shapiro and towards Walls, apparently in the last few hours. So,
Elite. Can I please get a show 4 for my 13-year-old corgi, Poppy, whom I had to put down yesterday? She was the best. F cancer. Sorry to hear about your dog. Juniper J. Musk and Peterson, freaks and weird. Apparently it's down to Walls or Shapiro now. We just don't know. 9 to 5. Josh, spare me the thousands of years line. This is a modern conflict, and indeed, of course it is. I'm an Israeli American in Pennsylvania. I was raised hardcore Zionist, probably wrote something pro-Israel when I was 10 years old. By the time I was 20, I had not been a Zionist for years. Colleen from Connecticut. I mean, people, I think, people's views evolve. I just am not convinced that his have evolved.
Yeah, he sort of just reiterated what he wrote with slightly less aggressive language.
Colleen from Connecticut. Once again, just don't share this story. It makes you look bad, and this guy thinks it makes him look good. That's right. That's my point. It's like, I can understand thinking in your head, like, kid, shut up already. But to present it in a way where you're trying to ingratiate yourself to people.
You don't need
and also, he's not even like, look, like, I feel like I could tell this story and understand, like, if I'm in the context of, like, sometimes I'm not as good of a parent as I want to be. Sometimes I'm not as patient of a human being as I want to be. Like, even in this moment, I'm talking to, Kamala Harris, and she's offering me the vice presidential thing, and my kid's, going, Dad, can I get a Nerf gun? And I said to him, hey, dude, shut up. Actually, like, the 7-year-old wouldn't ask for a Nerf gun. I mean, 7-year-old is a young kid, very small kid. That's going to sting if you actually said that. But I would recognize that, like, look, I'm telling this story because I'm talking about my failings as a parent.
Yeah. Specifically, you don't need to take a swipe at what the kid's interested in. You can just say, hey, Dad's on the phone right now. You don't need to take a shot at Pikachu.
I remember complaining about, like, my daughter's slime infatuation.
Oh, yeah.
Every single surface in our house had a film of, like, sort of like glue on it because she would do the slime everywhere. It would drive me effing crazy. But I still articulate that with understanding, like, she's a kid. I'm an adult. I'm supposed to be able to deal with this stuff. It is my failure as an adult and as a parent to not be able to. But the weird part about Vance is that he doesn't understand that's what he's telling. He thinks it's like, I don't know what he thinks it's like.
Wouldn't you think it'd be cool to be asked to be VP too?
Yeah, like, kid, do you realize Donald Trump's going to make me vice president, you idiot? Colleen from Connecticut. Those are your fired signs, people holding for Harris? Yes. Here's a tip. If you're going to do multicolor signs, the verb in dark blue and the subject in, like, some color you can't see on TV, big mistake. Because it looks like everybody's holding up a sign to Vance going, you're fired. DNC Google pundit, the voters of Pennsylvania will not punish Harris for picking Bashir, but many thousands of Michigan voters in other swing states almost certainly will be alienated if Harris chooses Shapiro. I agree.
It's going to be Walls.
I just don't think it's going to be Bashir. I mean, be Shapiro. But if it is, I think that's bad. Teacher Dan, I just realized while listening on my drive to North Carolina what I think was an episode of David Pakman with Mike Pillow, Lindell, and some former Trump poll data guy who had looked at the election data for the Trump admin and was there to essentially talk Mike down from this insanity cliff. Lindell sounds almost exactly like Jesse Ventura, especially in this conversation. Desert Lefty. For more information on Jordan's wife's spinning arm, go to meetspin.com.
No, don't.
Oh, okay. They're absolutely self-confident in their own selfishness and lack of empathy, not just to their political enemies, but to their own families. That's the epitome of the creepy word. Is that a bad site?
I would imagine.
Yeah, there's some graphic depictions
don't
of gay
do
sex.
that. Okay.
I wouldn't risk it.
Don't do it, folks. Unless you want to. Mikey
sure
Love. It's that kind of questioning attitude that'll keep you from finding a good husband, Sam. All right, 5 more of these. Marv from Iowa. If Shapiro is so popular in Pennsylvania, keep him in Pennsylvania. Have him go around the state as a surrogate to continue supporting and advocating for Kamala. Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's also very little data that the VP makes a difference in the context of a home state. I think it's quite clear that a VP can do, it's more likely a VP can do damage than to give you benefit. And so the burden of proof that there's going to be a benefit to it has got to be greater than the burden of proof that he could do a detriment.
And there were some, I think, either on both ends, it seems, in Politico this weekend, strategists on the Republican Democratic side that basically were like, look at Ron DeSantis in the context of someone being very popular or pretty popular, 50% around in their state, but it not fully translating outside of their
100%.
state. So if Bashir and Walz are more...
I give you Rudy Giuliani.
Right. If Bashir and Walz are more do no harm in the sense of we're not thinking, oh my God, they're going to expand the electoral map. Whereas Shapiro, it's like, he's going to deliver us Pennsylvania. Yeah. If that outcome is less foretold, it might be more disappointing, if anything.
Yes. Kowalski from Nebraska. I know Matt has touched on this before. I only bring it up because I had discussion on the Palestinian-Israel debate with some friends of mine. Important to remember that a colonial project can only succeed by placing settlers in an occupied territory. During the conquest of the Great Plains, U.S. Army had only had 3,000 soldiers. But if you park 2 million Central European farmers and give them the ability to murder anybody who steps on their land, you don't need an occupying army. The settlers in Israel do the same function. Soviets did this with Russification in their periphery. The British did this all around the world. Chinese imperial dynasties did this. It has gone on for thousands of years to the best of our knowledge and has always been wrong and an act of genocide. Preventing Germans from doing this in Eastern Europe was considered one of the greatest things victorious allies had done. And yet this is occurring right now in Israel. We're just turning our eyes and trying to wash our hands of this monstrous crime. We know stopping genocide is the right thing. We have the power to stop it with a stroke of a pen. We're choosing not to. Well said.
I think we found, how Trump keeps bringing up Hannibal Lecter. I think we found an explanation for that in that he thinks, this is a quote from today. Trump appeared to blame immigrants today, saying they're coming out of mental institutions and they're pouring into the United States and they're hurting and damaging our economy. People think that he thinks asylum.
Oh yeah, this was a week or two ago that he thought he got confused with they're seeking asylum because they're coming from an asylum.
Stupid.
A Square, Sam, I'm with you on the analysis and very concerned about Harris's brother-in-law influence. Agrees Shapiro would be a signal to how Harris administration will engage the left, AFT, and labor, but it would be depressing on other fronts as it keeps reinforcing what we've complained about for decades. The Democrats are bad at political strategic analysis and tactics. Boy, we shall see. All right, 2 more. Staley Dan Archist. Is there a definitive test that boxers have to take before a fight to determine who can fight who? I think it's weight. And the final IM of the day. Jonathan Armstead, Donald Trump loves it when his subordinates take his bashing and blame themselves. J.D. Vance's phone call story has shades of Chris Christie saying that Trump bullied him into ordering the White House meatloaf. Bradley, Matt, great job today. Emma, well done in absentia. Folks, we will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,